Good evening, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And welcome to a Monday night. Welcome to March the 1st, 2021, and our second show in our new series called McDuff and Nixon Tonight. So tonight, welcome once again, Golan Nixon. And I'm so glad to have you with us tonight to go over the past week or so. And I think we were talking before we started and thinking, tonight's a night to look at foreign policy more than anything else. There's just a lot of things going bad right now. I was going to say going on, but bad came out of my mouth. And what do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Because, it's a sad state of affairs when, the first significant foreign policy act that we see from the new president is to illegally bomb another country, and then the totality of the thing now is the two things really that stand out to me. Number one, not shockingly, Biden illegally bombed another country. But number two, and I think this is important to look at to understand the political context of this. What I see is a time, and you've probably seen it on Twitter. Donald Trump did the same thing, and when he did, I argued against him. You got to have no right to bomb Syria. Joe Biden, the president who made the decision today, went after Donald Trump for bombing Syria last time on Twitter. His a public relations person, Jen Psaki, went after Trump. Legitimate argument, saying you don't have legitimate authorization, to do this, which was correct. We're looking at AOC, all of these people who are well-known Democrats, well-known politicians. They all went after Donald Trump for doing exactly the same thing. And now the cat's got their tongue. It's radio silence amongst all of those. And I think it's important that for people, a person like me who's going to oppose all these actions that are illegal under international law, I believe in, God knows that we don't do this in America anymore, but I believe in actual diplomacy. But to watch these hypocrites, to me, that shows I'm glad I left the Democratic Party, because they stand for nothing. This is the purest case of hypocrisy you'll ever see.
Well, what are we going to call our new party, Garland? Because we got to get out of this place. We got to.
I can tell you what the Washington Post will call us: domestic terrorists. That's what they're going to call us. Anyone, right? If you're not like a member of the Lincoln Project, if you're not the Resistance or something, you got a Resistance shirt on or something like that, a pink hat, whatever the case. If you ain't one of those, it looks like they're going the route of, you're probably a domestic terrorist. Yeah. Kind of scary. I say that jokingly, but not completely jokingly.
No, but we have to let people know that that this is a fraud. This is a huge fraud that's being played upon the good-hearted people, the progressive-hearted people. They don't realize that they're being played, and they are being played, because people on the other side, except for the insiders, the provocateurs, the ones that want to stir something up and make violence, which there is a significant cadre of them. But 90 to 99% of people that voted for Trump are just standard American people that drive station wagons and go to the grocery store like everybody else. They're not this sophisticated cult that follows, blindly. Like, I think the mainstream wants everybody that watches the mainstream to think that people that voted for Trump are some kind of cult members or something. And it's a psychological war against us, dividing and conquering and trying to just make our population angry at one another, as is always the case, whether it's what it used to be, God, guns, and gays, right? And now now it's COVID and foreign policy. And now let's talk about that Jen Psaki, because as I think you were going to say, as I saw her quoted back in the Trump era, when that first strike against Syria was going on, for saying that, hey, yeah, Trump's a bad guy, but it's a sovereign country. We don't do that, Well, now she's completely flipped and saying, yeah, what was the phrase? It's a precision defensive strike. A
But
precision
here's what she
defensive strike.
said, and it was April 6, 2017. She said, also, she had already went after, but she said, also, what is the legal authority for strikes? Assad is a brutal dictator. Well, of course, she had to throw that in. But Syria is a sovereign country. Well, here's the bottom line. She's right. She was right then, but she's also right now. In fact, Ron Paul has an interesting article. I hope I shared it on. No, I might not have had enough time to share it on Twitter. A friend of mine just sent it to me. Ron Paul has an interesting article where he said now on his website, the Ron Paul Institute website, where he says bombing Syria is in fact an impeachable offense. So the Democrats, the hypocrite Democrats, of course, they went after Trump for Ukraine Gate, which was a joke. And let me add this. Imagine at the time the Ukraine Gate impeachment went down, right? At that time, the FBI had a copy of the Hunter Biden laptop. So at the time that they were pretending like that it was absurd that Trump would even imply such a thing, they had the evidence and they knew that what he had said was all true. Imagine if they'd have been honest and came out and said, well, imagine if that laptop had come out, I mean, that hard drive had come out during the impeachment. So we had two fraudulent, phony impeachments, in my opinion. But now this is and see again the hypocrisy. This, constitutionally speaking, this is impeachable because the president, the Constitution is very clear under about what circumstances the president can use to initiate military action. And what Joe Biden did, just like what Donald Trump did, what Obama did, et cetera, we go on, ain't it? So in reality, they've already passed their first impeachment test because, he failed their first impeachment test. But again, you get impeached. If you're Donald Trump, you get impeached for exposing the corruption of Joe Biden, because that's what he really did. He pointed to the corruption of Joe Biden. He got impeached for that. The second time, with what happened, the second impeachment, I just felt like what Donald Trump said on the 6th was constitutionally First Amendment protected speech. It was, to say fight like hell for somebody to argue that is driving someone to violence, particularly when they've even said they have evidence that people were planning violence before that date. Well, how are you going to say they were planning violence before January 6th, but it was the speech that Donald Trump made on January 6th that drove them to violence? Those two things don't go together. But my point being, this Syria thing, I think, just really enlightens us on so many levels, because we see that the Biden administration they're just another bunch of warmongers. And we also see that the Democratic Party is just, complete and total hypocrites. Even AOC, supposedly the squad, she's going to go there. She's going to, you know how that goes. She's going to fight the system when she gets there, and she just turns into the system like the rest of them. We've seen it. I remember seeing a bunch of, the Tea Party guys in 2010 that went up there and did the same thing. It's amazing how people go to DC and they, become part of the problem instead of addressing it. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, anything that really hits the media anymore is staged. I firmly believe that. I don't think there's any original, somebody says, hey, you know what, let's go attack the Capitol, or let's just go have a loud protest or something. I just don't think these things happen by generic, out of the grassroots anymore. We've all been intimidated not to do it. So, except for President Trump saying, come to the mall, come to Washington on January the 6th, people wouldn't have come. And so he got them there, but they're still not motivated to go charging into the Capitol. That took the agents provocateur. And I think there's enough evidence of that if it ever had to go to trial, that it would be shown, as you've stated many times. And I think, if that were ever to be the case, that it did go to an honest trial, then the American people would see that there's forces behind this that were orchestrating it and causing this really horrific destruction of our House of Representatives and our Capitol. Syria. Why are people bombing Syria? why are they doing it now? They were doing it, under Clinton, and then I think Trump didn't want to bomb Syria, and the political situation evolving around the various Arab states and things going on at the time. And I think it was probably Pompeo and maybe some generals that kind of pushed Trump into launching that missile strike, which I don't think actually did much damage. If that's my recollection from whatever it was 4 years ago. So I'm just saying, I don't know. I try to see some daylight between Trump and the deep state. And that's basically been my view. Why did I support Trump instead of either just laying out or supporting the Democrats, having been a lifelong Democrat myself? And the reason was because I could see some daylight there. Maybe Trump could keep us out of these unnecessary wars and start making us sovereign again. And as your metaphor is, to make us a nation and no longer running an empire around the world. That was the hope of us Trump voters that crossed over from the progressive left. And that was working for us. I mean, we really thought that we had won the election. It looked like there was quite clear evidence of fraud, and I know that if I say that there was, then that'll be the end of the channel because you can't say certain things anymore. But you know what I'm saying? That you saw the graph of the votes and how it just suddenly boom, all 300,000 new votes came in and they were all magically for Biden. Oh yeah, I'm not buying that, sir. I don't believe it. But it's all over now. The Supreme Court stood down, did nothing. It's over.
So a couple of things. As far as Donald Trump and foreign policy, I think that's something that definitely deserves to be discussed a little bit. I think Donald Trump came in, and if you remember, a couple of things Donald Trump tried to do. If you remember, Donald Trump said, we're going to bring the troops out of Syria and we're going to bring the troops out of Afghanistan, right? Within a couple of days, John Bolton said, no, we're not. And I think it was Donald Trump's intent to do that. Now, I got issues with Donald Trump when it comes to foreign policy, as I do with all of our leaders. You know what I mean? There were some areas where I was very unhappy with him. But you're right. He was a different animal than they're accustomed to. So when Donald Trump said we're leaving, I think he really wanted to get the heck out of Syria. I think at some point he realized that ain't going to happen. Additionally, he wanted to bring troops home from Germany. And it was widely reported, and people can probably search around and find this, that Donald Trump was saying, hey, how come we have so many troops in South Korea? That's expensive. Why don't we bring them home? Now, Donald Trump was thinking of the country as a nation. As a nation, you would ask yourself, why does it cost so much? Let's bring them home. Unfortunately, he didn't realize that behind him was an empire. And the empire couldn't even say to Trump, no, we're an empire. We have conquered these nations. And once an empire conquers a nation, it defends its conquered territory. And all of these countries, we conquered them. We ain't leaving. But they couldn't say that to Donald Trump. They just got mad at him for not knowing. So at some point, I think Donald Trump realized, nah, that stuff ain't going to fly. Now, for whatever reason, he went along with him on some of this stuff. And I was very unhappy with that. But at any rate, so let's talk about it. Syria. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who don't know the history. I'll do a very brief history on what happened. What happened people write this down, look this up. Operation Timber Sycamore. Operation Timber Sycamore, like wood timber, sycamore like the tree. That was Barack Obama. What that Barack Obama did with Operation Timber Sycamore was basically he started the move to try to overthrow the Syrian government. He started doing that by using the CIA to sneak weapons in to the mercenaries. Now, here's what people don't know and what they need to know. There's a reason that Tulsi Gabbard introduced a bill called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. Anybody can look that up. Why did she introduce a bill called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act? Because under Operation Timber Sycamore and other operations, the U.S. was funneling weapons into Syria to terrorists, to the al-Nusra Front, right? To Jabhat al-Nusra. They call themselves the Army of God, the Army of Islam. They were jihadi, Al-Qaeda, ISIS type organization. So the U.S. is doing that, right? And this is under Obama. So then they claim it's a civil war, but it wasn't a civil war started. So okay, on this goes. So then basically what happens? So the Syrians then say, uh-oh, this does not look good. We don't want this. We know how this plays out. But let's keep in mind something. Russia has an air base and they've got a Navy base there, right? So Russia has a Navy base, one of their only warm water bases. So Syria's like calling Russia, hey, they're trying to overthrow us. Russia puts in, which is of course another powerful military. So they put they come in, they're protecting their basically Russia is protecting an ally, and B, they have military assets there also. And so the US kind of got thwarted because Russia came in. And then what did Russia do? Russia then formed an alliance with Hezbollah, with the Iraqi militias, with Iran, and Russia was pretty much the air power and the intelligence, and these other groups did the ground fighting, and they knocked out ISIS. The US was funding ISIS. We were telling people that we were fighting ISIS. We were funding ISIS. And we also brought in Kurds and used them as mercenaries. So the US has been trying to overthrow Syria. So what happened? Trump wasn't really, he was doing bad things to Syria by any stretch of the imagination. He was, still sanctioning them. He still had troops there, etc. But he wasn't he wasn't trying to overthrow the government of Syria. He was just, as I said, occupying some areas and stealing their oil illegitimately. Okay. So the reason I say that is to say this. Now Biden's back. I believe that the Biden team are back to square one, where they're going to try to overthrow the government of Syria. Now, if the government of Syria is overthrown, it'll be replaced by ISIS, Al-Qaeda type organizations. There's no way around that. Just like whenever we overthrew Libya, and look what the mess it is. Look what you know what I mean? We overthrow a country, it ends up a mess. But so Biden and his team of war hawks and of really pro-Israeli people, well, Trump had them too, but Trump wasn't going to pull the trigger on that like the Biden people are. So I think that it's a dangerous time because the Biden people, Trump had brakes. When they wanted him to attack Iran, Trump pumped the brakes. Oh, that's going a little too far. That's going to be a bad situation. I'm not going that far. So Trump had his foot on the brakes. I don't think Biden's team has any brakes, and they'll do something and get us nuked. Or here's the other thing. I ended up like this. Or do something like attack Iran. If you understand that could wipe out pretty much the economy of the world. Iran could wipe out in hours. This is not a small country. This is a regional power. They could wipe out the oil production for most of the Middle East. I mean, just wipe it out. With missiles in hours. At that point, which one of you listening right now can pay $25 a gallon for oil and still survive? What's going to happen to our economy if no oil's coming out of there? This is not hyperbole. Iran can do that. And so these guys are whistling past the graveyard. They are really taking dangerous chances. And here's the thing about it. For all my issues that I had with Trump, he wasn't going to pull the trigger on an Iran war. And I think these people are war hawk enough that they may do something stupid like that. And if they do that, that's it for the Democratic Party. Well, that's it for all of us. Our economy is shot at that point. We're in a depression if that happens.
I have been looking at it, and I'm far from expertise, and I yield to yours on the details, but looking at the big picture. Remember, we talked about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, going from Russia on what is a northern route directly into Germany, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so that is opposed by the NATO powers, the old money of the Western Alliance. They don't want that. Well, why? Because they don't want Russia to have all that business of us selling all that oil and gas to Europe. And it's a huge, huge deal. So what is the alternative? Well, I think the alternative is Syria, and that is what is called the Qatar to Turkey pipeline. And you might be able to find that, Andy, if you're looking for a map of the Qatar to Turkey pipeline, you'll see that that goes directly through Syria. And if that is the deep state's plan, the Western banking conglomerate, whatever you want to call it, that's their plan, the Clinton plan, the Hillary plan, that they couldn't get through, and then Trump came along and screwed everything up. Then what they want to do now is force that through so that they supply the gas and oil to Europe. Because once it gets to Turkey, it just goes right across into Bulgaria and from there into Europe. They've got that much of it already done. The missing link is between the Persian Gulf and Turkey. So that goes directly through Syria. Now, Syria and Assad had always, there you go, there it is. See the Qatar down in the lower
Mhm.
right and the purple line going up through Syria into Turkey. Well, that is Qatar. That's an American, you know, the basis for all the Iraq war, the military base. That's definitely a NATO project, right? So those guys, they don't want the Nord Stream 2, but they do want this one. And if they can force their way through Syria, then they've got it. So Assad has to oppose that because of his alliance with Russia. And Russia is not going to lay down and let NATO or Qatar win this. That is where the the opposed, the irresistible force is going to run into the immovable object, and that is where the danger is right now. So to me, just looking at it from a big picture point of view, this is all about who gets to control the energy that flows into Europe for the next 100 years.
Yeah, and it's a sad state of affairs because it kind of goes back to the robber barons when the Rockefellers and the various people that own different railroad companies would go down to South America and overthrow a country just so they could get all of the railroad contracts. And that's what we're looking at now. It's like, well, this country over here, I've heard that Iran and Libya are both part. One of the reason they're targeted is because of their very important in China's Belt and Road Initiative. So you've got people that go after a country and just make up any kind of lies. We need to overthrow the country because the sun is too high in the sky today or whatever. And they've got tons of alternative motives. Let's not forget, and this is very important, the Golan Heights area of Syria. The Golan Heights area is an area that Iran, it's part of Syria, excuse me, Israel, when they were at war with Syria in 67, they grabbed this particular area and they said, we're not going to give it up. It's a strategic area. Yeah, well, it's loaded with oil and all kinds of stuff like that. Shockingly, right? In the same way that the U.S. is surprisingly, we set all of our bases up in the oil fields for Syria. Well, in the same way. So think about this, Syria. The U.S. now has a bunch of bases in Syria's main oil fields. Israel has grabbed the Golan Heights, which is another part of Syria that's loaded with oil. Does anybody out there think it's an accident that the oil producing areas of Syria that the U.S. and Israel happen to have taken over? But keep in mind something. So the Israel is controlling the Golan Heights, which is illegal. If you're in war, according to international law, if I go to war and I take some area, once the war is over, I got to give that area back. But there's a company called Genie Energy. This should tell you something. Genie Energy has been given exclusive rights by the Israelis to come in and to mine the Golan Heights, to take their oil, etc. Right? So Genie Energy, listen to who's on the board of Genie Energy. Larry Summers, the Clinton's friend. buddy. Bill Richardson, who also happened to be, what was he? Was energy secretary in the Clinton administration. Mary Landrieu, she was a senator from Louisiana. And what's in Louisiana? A whole lot of oil. She was the chair of the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. How about James Woolsey, former CIA director, right? Now, listen to who they've added. Oh, they've added some distinguished members to their board. Dick Cheney, Rupert Murdoch, Lord Jacob Rothschild,
All right.
and
Yeah.
Michael Steinhardt, Wall Street investor. So though these people have a company that has exclusive rights to the oil in the Golan Heights, but that's Syria's oil. So that should tell you why they ain't giving that up. They're there to steal the oil in the same way they're there to steal the oil from Venezuela, in the same way that we attacked Iraq to steal the oil. The Americans, bad news for you. You think you're on a luxury liner, you're on a pirate ship. This is the Jolly Roger, and our government, once again, as people say, it's an oil. What is it? How do they say that? It's an oil company or an oil company with an army or something, however that puts. That's what we're proving to be again. And you bring up again this whole thing about Nord Stream 2 and these pipelines. There are a lot of people that argue the whole Afghanistan thing was, you can look into that. There was a lot of issues with pipelines going through Afghanistan too. We see that over and over. But the US tells us we've got to do it to help the people, bring democracy, whatever the heck. They're out there robbing and stealing, and we don't even get a piece of. We can't even get a couple $100 from the government in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes, and President Biden is considering it very carefully, that possibly a smaller group of people might get a small handout. In other words, he's kicked back in his easy chair, petting his dog, thinking, how many people can I afford to give $1,400 to?
You ever notice that never happens for Wall Street? You never notice that, well, we're going to give you $2,000. Okay, well, I voted for you. Can I have it now? Make that $1,400. You never notice that never be a cold day in hell before they say to the weapons makers, well, we might have to drop that $1.4 trillion deal for the F-35s back to 1.3 trillion. Never happened. But when it comes to you and I, man, times are kind of tough. They can't afford to help us out.
They're just teaching us that they're teaching us. So you don't have a voice. You don't. We don't have to keep our promises. We're us. You're you, and we're us, and we don't. You just got to get used to it, because we have all the cards. You have no cards anymore. We took them all, and you're not going to get back in the game. We just might give you a crumb here and there. It's a terrible thing to be living through, but by speaking about it, hopefully we can raise awareness. And I think that's mainly our mission here, is to try to raise awareness of all the things that you've just been saying. But I mean, the humanitarian cost of what we do is just horrible. And I think, I had a wonderful interview with Douglas Valentine on Saturday, and one of the things that he spoke about was how pervasive the government's ability is to psychologically manipulate us in such a way that, number one, the pilots of the of the bombers, that bombed the cities, that bombed, Serbia, that bombed, Dresden, that bombed, Tokyo, they all have numbed themselves to the massive human carnage that they're causing just by opening that Bombay door and dropping their ordnance. They've got psychological, some type of psychological barrier that keeps them from breaking down with conscientious guilt. And then they come home, and the Air Force has a whole program of how to get them back into mental state so that they can actually function in the society where there is morality and where there is boundaries where you can't do that. And then secondly, they take the stories of what goes on and they completely manufacture this propaganda idea of this heroic, Air Force mission, that does all this great stuff. And the American people are completely bamboozled. They don't know, they don't see, they don't understand the actual human cost of American foreign policy.
Well, there's something else too, and this is, I think, is an issue that we have now. A lot of people look at the news. We've all been watching the news for years, and I don't know if you've noticed over the last 5, 6 years that it's just gone straight to hell. You can't, like we were saying, I can't watch Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and I was on Fox like almost every day at one point for like many years of my life. If somebody goes and searches on YouTube Garland, Nixon, and Fox News, a whole lot of stuff will come up because I was on there all the time. But over the last several years, I've noticed it's like, why is it then if you turn on CNN, every other minute is, and now we've got former national security expert, retired CIA guy, whatever, right? Well, the National Defense Authorization Act, it was around 2012, somewhere between 2012 2014. Barack Obama signed it, and basically what it did is it effectively nullified the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, which explicitly forbid information and psychological operations aimed at influencing U.S. public opinion. So this passes, right? So what that means now is that the government that is allowed to use these kinds of tactics on you, that they can use psychological operations, information operations on their people. So if people are wondering, gee, it didn't seem like that when I was a kid. Yes, we had Operation Mockingbird. Yeah, there was, the media has always been problematic. No question about that. If you research it, you'll find out, of course. However, it seems to have gotten worse. And people intuitively know it. They're like, I used to be able to at least watch the news. Like you said, I can't even walk by the room and with it on, or I'll just like barf and, run out the room anymore. You can't watch it for 1 minute. I believe that when Barack Obama signed that, it changed the game. And based on the other night, I don't know if they had 60 Minutes. My God, it's a propaganda outlet. 60 Minutes had this thing on Syria. And I know enough about Syria to watch that. And it was pure propaganda. Pure propaganda. They had people on here that are used, Muaz Mustafa, the guy's like used on all kinds of propaganda stuff on Syria. This is a guy who worked with some people to put up a Syrian exhibit in the Holocaust Museum of DC to like down Syria and basically, to argue for, the against the Syrian government. To me, that's kind of like the Holocaust Museum. People actually died. That's not, you go there, it's sad or whatever. You shouldn't be looking at propaganda in the Holocaust Museum. So now these people, it's not just the news. I've watched TV shows and I've heard things said there, and I'm like, what are they doing in a sitcom talking about politics like that? I remember in 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders guy, right? There we go. I was what the heck? That's the Holocaust Museum, right? I was a Bernie Sanders guy. I remember watching a sitcom and they're like making jokes about, and like Bernie Sanders is a serious candidate. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is a sitcom. People have a right to vote for whoever they want. Why should Hollywood be basically telling everybody, forget Bernie Sanders, basically vote for Hillary Clinton? I think that what happened, that NDAA change has just changed the game so much that really all we're getting all the time in this country now is just it's a all out full court press, all out propaganda all the time. That you could make an argument that our country has been taken over completely by the deep state, because if they control the narratives and they can pump out propaganda from every angle, really aren't they in control?
And yes, and they are in control. And the first thing we have to do is to start accepting that they are in control. How else can we possibly make enough sense of what's going on to think of a way out of this trap? Is first we have to recognize, hey, we're in a trap. We fell into the hole. We're down at the bottom of the hole, and the hunter's coming. He'll be coming along here with his boys, and we're going to be cannibal soup pretty soon if we don't do something. And it's hard, but what we have to do is recognize that we are in a hole, and then then we have to stop digging, and that means to stop supporting, to stop supporting this monster that's going around destroying lives around the world. Uh, we haven't even mentioned Haiti yet, and that's another tragedy that American people are not learning about. You see snatches of it. I see it on Twitter. I see it around in some of the sources I look at, but this is not mainstream media. You've been paying some attention to it. I think, Garland, can you give us an update on what's going on there?
Well, it's sadly, Haiti is just like the rest of the Caribbean, Central America, and South America, right? Just countries that the U.S. has just overthrown one at one time after another, put in puppet governments, put in dictators. For all of the Hillary Clinton saying that she's for, helping Black people, Black Lives Matter, all that kind of crap. When she was Secretary of State, they tried to the people in Haiti tried to raise the minimum wage to like $3.61 an hour, and Hillary fought to make it stop. The cables, WikiLeaks came out to show that, which shouldn't shock you, of course. No one. Let me tell you about this. I got a friend who's there right now. There are no human beings in Haiti who are hated any worse than the Clintons. They despise the Clintons there. When they're in there, if you see pictures of their protests, you will always see some signs that say something about the Clintons because they know them. And that Clinton, that's one of the places there where the Clintons stole a lot of money. They raised like $1 billion or something there and built like 6 houses and a hotel with $1 billion. But the bottom line is, it's just another example of complete and total hypocrisy. How we're always like calling somebody a dictator. Oh, we've got to overthrow that government because that guy's a dictator. No, it's that one over there. They're a dictator. Everybody's a dictator, right? The guy who's in charge, who's the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, right? I think February 6th, whatever date it was, it doesn't matter. His 4 years or however many years were up. He was supposed to leave. The government basically was like, okay, it's to be like, what's funny about it? Didn't they scream and yell, Trump's not going to leave. What are we going to do on January 20th? Trump won't leave. And everybody said, and I'm like, get out of here with that Trump won't leave stuff. Yeah, I don't even want to hear. What is he going to do? Get out of here. When it's time to leave, he's going to leave. The game's over, whatever, right? It was silly to me for them to argue that like he was going to like, I don't know, nail himself into the Oval Office and not get out. It was ridiculous. However, right now, Joe Biden is recognizing a guy who's the president, prime minister, whatever you call it, of Haiti, whose term is up. And he arbitrarily decided, I think I'm going to stay another year. Joe Biden then said, you know what? We'll recognize him for another year. Well, how is that bringing democracy? So what's going on now is the Haitian people, unbelievable numbers, are in the streets of Haiti. Right? Unbelievable numbers in the streets of Haiti, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. The Haitians are like, no way. And I mean, think about it in America. Imagine Joe Biden, whoever it is, not just that there was an election. There wasn't even an election, but your time is up and it says you got to go. And now they got to have an election and put somebody else in on January 1st. And January 1st, you just say, I think I'll just stay another year. And there's the U.S. The only reason that he can stay in power is because the Biden administration is saying to him, sure, we'll recognize you for another for an hour. So anything that they say about they're bringing democracy around the world or they're going against a dictator or whatever, they're holding a dictator in power right now who has no right to be in power. And just about the whole country is in the street saying no. And they have a right to decide who they want. They have a right to democracy. And again, so January 6th, they're trying to overthrow our democracy. They're taking our democracy is at risk. Everybody's democracy is at risk right now. And it's at risk from a rapacious empire who's going around the world arbitrarily saying, you're a dictator. Oh, we can have your oil? Yeah, you ain't a dictator. How about you over there? Can we have your stuff? No. Oh, you want sovereignty of your own nation? Yeah, well, then in that case, your leader's a dictator, whoever it is. It's absurd. It's laughable, except for it's not laughable for the countries like the people of Haiti who just want to choose who represents them, kind of like us.
Yeah.
The only thing we get every 4 years, we get a choice usually between John McCain and John McCain. I always say, whoever you vote for God's sake, we always get John McCain. Well, that's because the system is John McCain. And whoever the president is, when they say they want to do something other than John McCain, the John McCain system steps in and says, you ain't sending those troops home from Syria, pal. And you got to wonder how the threat, how extensive the threats are. Because just as an example, Donald Trump, when Donald Trump said the troops are coming home, and 2 days later, Bolton said, no, there aren't. You know, Trump, he's kind of a boisterous, chesty kind of guy. You got to imagine that Trump would say, hey, I'm the president here. But he might have been told, you know, it's in your best interest. We're just saying it's a dangerous world. If you decide not to go along with that, we'll talk to Mike Pence and we'll set him up. We'll take care of it after, you know, post Trump. And we're not saying how you're going out of office. It's your choice.
Garland, what is wrong with the average Democratic voter that they can't see the hypocrisy of our policy toward Haiti? Haiti has been, you know, I mean, you've had, you know, how many movies made about it, you know, with the Toussaint Louverture and all of the great heroes of Haiti. Would not the African American population of this country, for instance, think of him as a hero and think of Haiti as a place that should take a particular attention and support of people here that, you know, just because of the tragic history of it, that we would want to say, we're changing. We in America are not that person anymore. You know, well, this is not, you know, the Confederacy, which wouldn't wouldn't allow America to recognize the government of Haiti simply because of the color of the elected leaders at the time. You know, that's 150 years ago. We're at that same spot here, which, as you just described it, we are not recognizing the legitimacy of the electoral process of the democratic form of the republic in Haiti. And we're not allowing that to work the way that they want it to work. It's the same thing that was going on back then, was that Haiti, because it has the power to be a black black-led success story, has to be suppressed. Haiti has natural resources. Haiti has, we understand it has gold. It probably has uranium. It has probably, for some reason, George de Mohrenschildt spent a lot of time in Haiti, and he, being the guy that was Lee Harvey Oswald's mentor, was a gas and oil explorer for the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. So there's stuff there in Haiti that could be the basis of a real sovereign nation. And I think that's the problem, that they just don't want there to be an example of a sovereign nation that is led by indigenous people. They want to make sure that every place in the world is somehow under the control of the old establishment, the old WASPs, Anglo-Saxon Protestant money of Wall Street, London, and now we have to add in the Silicon Valley folks.
Yeah, well, and that's the bottom line. I mean, it's this whole empire thing going I mean, if you look at Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, the US says this is our backyard, whatever the case. All it means is we can control all these people. There's a lot of resources there, and we want to be in control of them. We're a powerful empire, and we will not accept, look, you're okay if you will allow the US government to install your government. If you allowed the US government to install your government, they'll kind of leave you alone. But then the problem you have, if you look at the countries that are doing that, like Colombia, they're extremely brutal towards their people. And what happens is the neoliberals simply come in and ship all your natural resources out. They steal all your stuff, and none of the money goes back to the people. So what you have in a lot of these countries a tiny cabal of crooks who want to work with the US. They'll help the US, the EU, etc. They'll steal these people's resources, and that little cabal of Haitians or whatever country it is, Colombians, they get lots and lots of money for doing it, but the majority of the people suffer and get nothing. So it's getting to a point, if you look in South America, it's getting to the point where a lot of the people in these countries are saying, look, if the US is here, we're going to get oppressed. If a puppet government will get oppressed and we'll get nothing. So we might as well push back. We're not going to allow it anymore. And you look at some of the countries, the US and Bolivia, the US overthrew the Bolivian government. They just said, well, you can't have that guy anymore. His election was fraudulent, and basically overthrew the government, put in a puppet government. But within a year, the people of Bolivia did something interesting. Not only did they protested for a while. And after a while, they just said, well, this ain't working. They shut the government down with a general strike. We ain't going to work. None of us. You want to run this country, you'll run this country, but you'll have nothing in it to run because we're not going to go to work. And when they did that, they had to have an election and the people could put who they wanted in. And because my thing is this, I believe in, and that's what I think what we have. And to me, that's one of the dividing lines for me politically, right? I don't know about you. And that is, I believe in national sovereignty for the United States and for all other countries. And I don't care what kind of government, it's none of my business. It's, to me, this is the thing I like about Russia and China that they do. Russia and China are like this. We'll do business with you. Have you ever noticed, like, the Saudis will cut a bunch of people's heads off and do all kinds of terrible things, and the US will shake their fist at it and say, that's terrible, this is the human rights. And Russia and China will simply say, if we're buying something from you, we're buying it from you. And if we ain't going to get involved in your internal affairs. We may not like it. It may look ugly, but you do what you do. And to some extent, that's the way I feel. Okay, you're doing good, bad, or indifferent things in your country. If the UN gets together and all says the UN is going to take action to try to stop you from doing something bad, fine. But the US just being the world's police, hypocritically selecting, well, this country over there did something, we're punishing you. Oh, yeah, well, Mohammed bin Salman just cut some guy up with a bone saw. Yeah, that petrodollar thing, we don't really want to fool with that. Nah, we ain't doing nothing to Saudi Arabia. You end up being exposed as a hypocrite. And I believe, and hopefully a lot of our watchers believe, and other people believe, sadly, there are a lot of people don't. I simply believe each a country deserves self-determination. And here's one of the big things. If our government's not giving other countries self-determination, you can damn sure believe they ain't giving it to us. If they're not giving them a choice, if they won't respect other people's choice to choose who they want and run their country, don't fool yourself into thinking that you have a government that's going to dominate other countries, overthrow their governments, screw over their elections, do everything they can to put in puppets. And if you think they're not going to do it here, you're fooling yourself. Ultimately. So that's why I say, for those of you out there, for those people who will go along with us interfering with other elections, overthrowing governments, you are only digging your own grave. That's how we got where we are now. And it's just going to get worse. They're gotten to a point now. There was a discussion amongst some of these Democrats, literally, and you can look, anybody can look this up, about putting together like a panel of people so that if someone wanted to run for president, they had to be approved by this panel before they could even run. I could look it up and find that for you. And I'm like, egads, you're going to put 3 or 4 neocons and some of these neoliberal fools that are going to ask them things like, well, how do you feel about transgender rights or something like that? Nothing about war you got to be in favor of, but they're going to ask you about something like that. And then they're going to come in and just start the same war and give everything to Wall Street. I mean, not that don't get me wrong. I believe in equality for everybody. I'm just saying they use that kind of stuff to bamboozle people so they can get what they want. And literally, so all I can say to people who think it's okay to go to Venezuela and Iran and Haiti and wherever and overthrow their government and determine who they're going to have, you're bringing that on yourself. You need to fight against it other places in order to make sure it doesn't happen here also.
Well said. And one of the things that I just absolutely, it's golden to have you, Garland, speaking about sovereignty, because my studies, over a long time, it has led me to that same conclusion that you have, so viscerally taken on, and that is we can't have peace without sovereignty, because if we don't have sovereignty, then what we have is a bunch of power mongers that are competing among each other. And that is where the problem lies, is that the people that have control of our financial system are exactly those types of people, the types of people that are afraid of everybody else, is convinced that nobody has ethics, that nobody is willing to be is trustworthy, and that because they themselves are not trustworthy, that's how they got rich, that's how they play the game, that's how they're always going to live their life, and they think that those of us that are trustworthy are stupid fools to be so gullible. And they have got this mindset that it's psychopathic. There's something they'll never be fully human. They don't understand what it's like to relax and sit down and have a beer with somebody and just absolutely let your feelings and your heart go out and just you know just just let it go, because they're all living a lie, and they're so afraid that if they get found out that they're going to get that they'll die, that they'll lose their everything. Well, this paranoia is why they keep provoking on the edge of China, on the edge of Russia. Keep pushing. Syria, do they really need all the money they could get from this Syria thing if they win it? Well, probably they do, because they're financially they're all in hock at this point anyway. But because I think they all bet on the Paris Accord and they lost it, that they're 4 years behind in getting that Paris tax in their pockets. So, but they're all scrambling for money right now. That, to me, is the only thing that they want is money. And they can't let up on Russia. They can't let up on China, because if they do, then what if China and Russia do to them what they want to do to China and Russia? It's just the way their mind works, and they're stuck in this complete inability to create a world based on trust.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, again, as an empire, there's only two kinds of countries. There's countries that you have conquered and countries that you intend to conquer. And Russia and China obviously fall into the latter categories. The thing is that and I know you're with me on this. The thing about it is, the danger, they do not face the fact that one slip and all humanity is gone for good. They're like, I'm going to go. The Biden team has been pretty clear. We're going to go increase tension. I've even read it. We're going to increase tensions with Russia. Wait a minute. The United States and Russia has 95% of all nuclear weapons on the world. Here's what we know about Russia. They could wipe us out in the same way that we could wipe them out. So how dangerous and irresponsible is it, knowing that one slip and that's it for all humankind? Ever forget forget it. If somebody looks on the radar and they're like, is that a flock of seagulls or a missile coming in? I think it's a missile launch. That's it. Everyone you've ever known ever would know. That's it. This is a flat black rock. 100 years from now, aliens are landing on it saying, gee, you think there was ever life on this thing? Wait, what's this? An old burnt rainbow flag. I wonder what that was for. That's about all they'll find left of us. And it's not worth it. And that's the thing that really galls me about these people. Look, dude, if you want to be a daredevil and go walk on the side of 20-story buildings, I would advise against it, but that's fine. But don't take me up there with you. And that's what they're doing. They're risking our lives, our families, they're risking everything. And that's, what I think is the most obscene about these people, that they are willing to pretend, to do the things they get. Imagine that. To say, I'm going to increase tensions with nuclear powers. Any responsible human being would say, we got to make sure that nothing bad happens here. This could really go bad. These people, but they're not stupid. They're evil. There's a difference.
Right. And they don't care about us. They don't care at all about us. We are not even in their equation, that your family is going to be gone and everything. Because, you've heard of BlackRock, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
That's what they're going to be. They're going to be down there in the caves. And they built them, this is Nazi technology, built underground cave building is like their specialty. So they're good. They're down there, and however long it takes, and they've probably got some cleanup technology for after the war. So we have the nuclear war, and they're a million or two of themselves and their best buddies are still alive. They're either down underground somewhere or they're up flying around in some kind of nice spaceship that's so far up there that we can't see it. So we don't even know they're there. But the they'll clean it up. 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, they'll clean it up. They'll bone it. That's their vision. They're not thinking that they're going to destroy themselves. They're thinking they're going to get rid of the rest of us, and then they'll own the whole enchilada.
Yeah, I tend to think that's possible. I tend to think a couple other things too, that sometimes the system spins out of control and the people that are running it aren't even in control in a way anymore. Here's what I mean. It's like our economic system. They don't even control. I have some friends that are economists, right? And basically pretty knowledgeable people. And they're like, you know what? These people really don't know. They're not sure where we are and what's going to happen. And they're dancing around on the head of a pin all the time. I mean, if you think about what they did, they just take everything. You take a bunch of loans and you put $100 billion worth of loans and you slice them into something called asset-backed securities. And you're not even sure what that is, but you sell them. And you tell people, oh, by the way, it's going to pay you a certain percentages if when these loans pay off. And you got that all calculated, but you don't know if the loans are going to pay off because a lot of them are bad because they were sold just so you would have loans. You sell bad loans, $100 billion worth of bad loans, just so you'll have something to slice up and call asset-backed securities. And then you sell more and more and more base to chop it up into smaller parts. And then when it's all said and done, you're not even really sure what it is yourself. So they have all these complex things. And when things start to go bad, as they are, they're not sure why, because the system's too complex. But here's what they are sure of, that they'll go to the government and get $1 trillion. So they put together the system that it's not that they don't understand it because they're not smart enough. Nobody could understand it. It's not understandable. It's not even a real system. It's just it's just a self-serving racket. So now all they're doing is just going to the government, getting bailed out constantly. That's what we're doing. Bail out, bail out, bail out. The government is in full-time bailout mode for corporations, for banks, and everything. And most Americans don't even know that one of the things that happened with the CARES Act was that the U.S. is now the lender of last resort for companies. 1 in 5 companies, corporations in America, 1 in 5 is completely underwater and is just trying to pay off the interest on its debt. These companies will sell bonds to do that. Guess who buys the bonds? It's what Lenin referred to as state capitalism. How can we say that we're not state capitalism if the corporations are literally selling their bonds to the government? The government's buying bonds that are no good. It's like people are saying, well, should the government give us 2,000? They're giving 2 trillion to the corporations. Well, unthinkable trillions. I'm saying 2. I wish it were only 2. They're floating the corporations in America right now. And most people don't even know that that's going on.
Well, Garland Nixon and John O'Loughlin are 2 people that do know what's going on. We've been studying this stuff, and we recommend that everybody take as much time as you can out of your day and do study it yourselves, because this is crucial. It's only as individuals that we're going to make a difference. We don't have a party that we can rely upon, I don't think. We don't have leaders that we can say, I'm going to just vote for them and forget about it. No, there's too much at stake right now. We have to educate each other and educate ourselves as to where we really are, how far down in the hole we are, how far have we dug, and then we got to convince each other to stop digging and get the heck out of this hole by helping each other climb out of it. And that's what we have to do, in my opinion. And the best way I can do it is to find smart people like Garland and talk back and forth and share our thoughts and observations but things that we really want to share with the world. Say, listen, here's what I think is important today, March the 1st, 2021.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And don't get caught up. One of the things I think, I was a loyal Democrat for many, many years. And then I woke up one day and I realized that, the parties, not the Democratic Party, the parties have been totally and completely compromised in the United States. And, if you are holding on to one of these, I'm not saying don't be a member of the party. I'm not saying vote for anybody or not vote for anybody. I'm simply saying if you think that either of these parties is not completely compromised, if one of these parties is looking out for your best interest, you got to look out. You're misled. You got to look out for your best interest. These parties are wholly compromised, and the core of these two parties, the Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi's, etc., the core of these two parties is the same. There's some stuff around the edges that are different, and I'd say this. I've said this a while. Donald Trump didn't win because he was a Republican. He won because he wasn't. And right now they're scared to death because they know that if somebody who runs who's not a member of these two parties in 2024, who has a different vision, that's what America wants. Donald Trump may be dead by the God only knows. We may all be, but people are looking for a different vision. They're tired of the same old thing.
Amen to that. And once again, thanks, Garland Nixon. Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight with us. And we'll be back next Monday with another edition of McDuff and Nixon Tonight. Thanks, Garland.
Thank you.